Okay, this is Ms. Overton back with her video lesson on World War II, the Pacific Theater. Where we left off is island hopping is key to ending the war. Okay, with island hopping, I failed to tell you in my last lesson, I mentioned Midway. You've got a video on the Battle of Midway. It is the turning point of the war. But I did not mention the Philippines. They were captured, and unfortunately, they were captured by the Japanese. They were friendly with the Americans. Unfortunately, MacArthur, who was a great general during this war, is pulled away because they're starting to focus on the European theater there. So there's this famous thing called the Death March. And I'm going to put a video on for y'all to watch about that. That's very short, but it explains it. But many American soldiers were marched to their death, and the Filipinos, because they were forced to surrender when MacArthur left them. They thought they were going to come back. They held off as long as they could. And Japan always looks at the war that you've got to fight until death. You never surrender. Literally, kamikaze soldiers went in like the World Trade Center and bombed, used themselves as torpedoes. They actually found a soldier after World War II. It ended 30 years later, was on an island, found alive. When he went back to Japan, his mother said, "Why did you bother coming home?" I mean, that's how they thought of it in Japan. So anyway, other islands were taken besides Midway. Wanted to mention the Philippines. Didn't mention Iwo Jima and Okinawa. My dad actually fought on Okinawa, and he had a story about an orphan that was on Okinawa, that little boy that kind of came up, and they talked to him best they could, and they said, "Where are your parents?" And he would go, boom, and then he'd have a tear run from his eyes, what my dad said, and he'd go, "Mama, Papa." So what happened to them? They got bombed. And that's what leads into the end of the lesson, how the island hopping was a strategy to get to Tokyo, Japan, take the land by the American forces, and then move forward and penetrate as we do in the European theater with D-Day. But Truman, our now president, decides that would be too costly for American lives. So we did drop bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Anyway, so here are your review questions, everybody. Here's your summary. What's the significance of the Lend-Lease Act? Make sure you know that Great Britain gets supplies on an IOU basis. They're going to pay us back, and the U.S. stays neutral. What was the significance of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor? It's the main cause that the U.S. enters the World War II. 3 difficulties that U.S. troops faced during World War II. Big thing is getting those supplies, getting the soldiers across. With the Pacific, you got the great distance. We needed those different islands for fueling stations because it's so far to Japan from the United States. So the distance is huge. The jungle terrain was huge. And then over in Great Britain, in Europe, in Normandy Beach, we had a different kind of thing. We were forced to penetrate through the enemy lines in a little bit of a different way. But when you think about it just on the Pacific theater, this question asked about World War II overall, it is the distance to get the soldiers and the supplies, the jungle terrain after they get there, and hopping on these islands, and the food spoilage. I mean, that hot climate would spoil food. Fuel is a factor in both of these. All right, in the Pacific theater, what was the significance of the Battle of Midway? That's the turning point in the Pacific theater of World War II. The Japanese military is crippled because they lose so many battleships and airplanes. This is a war that's fought with both planes and ships. And the United States gains another fueling station with Midway, and we also gain control of the Pacific Ocean. So make sure we're pointing right here. All right, in the Pacific theater, what's the significance of dropping the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki? It saves American lives. And what's the significance of the Manhattan Project? It was a code name for the U.S. to create the atomic bombs. Yes, top secret project nobody knows about. They were tested in Los Alamos, New Mexico, because there's no one in the desert, no lives will be lost. They're named Little Boy and Fat Man. The airplane was the Enola Gay that carried them, and they were dropped on Hiroshima first, then Nagasaki, and it results in Tokyo Bay Harbor needs to be shut down. The emperor finally does surrender. So zoom in. You guys take a picture of this. Make sure that you are completing this part of the study guide. And after I give you a video lesson on the European theater, and we do our questions there, we'll come back and review the European theater questions. All right, so I will shout out to you to see if you have any questions. We'll be connecting through Google Meets, through Remind, and through Schoology Chat. Y'all are doing an amazing job, and I appreciate all of your efforts. Let's have one more picture of these questions, and make sure you get them down, students, and keep submitting those assignments. Thanks. We're doing this. Digital Learning, Day 4.